Boardroom Bound, Episode 11. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give new and aspiring directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder that you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu. In today's show, we'll be speaking with Heather White. Heather is a boardroom matchmaker, networking, and personal brand expert, and has been doing this for 18 years. Her networking expertise has helped thousands of people build both their personal brand and their network strategically for career and business opportunities. And it was from this wealth of networking expertise that she created the Boardroom Ready program in October 2017. And in just over a year, this personal development program has successfully matched 8 people onto boards. Heather spends vast amounts of time sourcing exactly the right professional to match with exactly the right board. That's a lot of face-to-face meetings, drinking coffee, and time spent on LinkedIn. It's immensely rewarding for her to contribute to creating the next generation of leaders, ready for the challenges of the boardroom. And in today's show, Heather's going to be talking about the evolution of her career from an expert in networking and personal branding, which is how I got to know her over a decade ago, and how that has morphed into what she's doing now with her Boardroom Ready program. Not something that she intended, not something she sought out. It came to her when people saw that she was a networking expert asking for her help getting onto boards, much like much of our audience in this show would consider. And so Heather spent a lot of time meeting with executives, figuring out what would be the right way to make this work. And so what that means is we'll hear about not only from the perspective of someone who wants to get on a board, but what boards are looking for in terms of how they bring people on. This will be a behind the scenes peek of what it's like inside the boardroom and how the decision makers work. I can't wait to give you that knowledge. Let's jump into the show. Heather White, delighted to have you on Boardroom Bound today. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to this, Alexander.
Well, we were talking about before we started on air here that we've known each other about a decade, and I still vividly remember the first time we met. You were brought in when I was a management consultant. You were brought into the company and you were sharing your personal branding and networking expertise. And this was the first time I really started to learn about those concepts. And in my mind, that's what you're the guru in. You still are. And of course, today we've got some other stuff that you're doing, which is incredibly exciting and relevant. But perhaps you can dial it back a bit for us. I know you've been doing this stuff for a couple of decades. What does that look and feel like for you? How are you working with people on their networking and branding? We know that's essential for people who are thinking about board roles.
It really is a delight to actually reflect back over the last decade, as you sort of say, since when we sort of first met, and look at how things have progressed. And I always find interesting is how much things haven't changed as well as how much things have changed. One of the things I get asked a lot, is what's new in the networking and personal brand front. And whilst, I go around on the internet and sort of like do my research and stuff, there isn't anything new. But I mean that in such a positive way, because the great thing is people are people, no matter where they are in the world. And if they like and trust you, then things can happen. Now, I always sort of add, I've got a little mantra, which I'll get in at the beginning, and I've no doubt I'm going to say it several times during this chat, which is what I've learned over the years is that if I don't get you, I can't help you. Now, what is interesting, this conversation actually has taken place because you and I met a long time ago. And when you were thinking about doing these podcasts and getting things going, you were racking through your brain going, who do I know that does X, Y, Z?
Right.
And everybody that you've gone to is somebody that you know to a degree, you like them, and there's something about them that you get that will work within what you're doing. So when I reflect back, is that's what's not changed, is that people still do business with people they like and trust and they get. So as in, I have this gap, I'm looking for someone who's got X, Y, Z. Who do I know? And that's where people sort of fit in. And that's where nothing has changed. But what has changed, and this is the bit that I think everyone, if you're not already up to board with this, but you should be, is that obviously the internet, LinkedIn, social media.
Oh, LinkedIn was a game changer.
Massive game changer. And even I'm what you call a late adapter, adopter, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm one of those ones. I'm not a techie sort of person, I confess, but I absolutely adore LinkedIn. And you're right, it's absolutely a game changer. But then a lot of the other social media platforms can also be that as well. I mean, I tend to focus mostly on LinkedIn, but all the other stuff I think are really relevant. And that's what's changed, is actually the speed in which you can connect with somebody and start a dialogue.
Right.
But other than that, everything else I think remains the same. So that's what's been going on, is I just continue to get the message out there, sort of saying network, and get your message clear. And it was all of that side of it that then kept driving people to me, all the people I've been coaching and stuff, saying, Heather, I want to become a non-exec.
Well, that means your message was clear about how important it was to be clear in your message, so come to me to help you.
Yeah, and that was accidental. I never in a million years did I plan for getting into the board space. Not in a million years. It was not even on my radar. But it's because people liked and trust me, and they sort of come to me, Heather, you're connected on all sorts of things. Where do I go to this? And I was like, well, I haven't got a clue. So, you do what you do, go around and ask people, found out some stuff, did some signposting. And that's what then started to build this. Heather's a go-to person. Go and talk to her about this. And it was that. That's
a good reputation to have, by the way.
Yeah. And I absolutely love it.
Well, you're a gregarious, networking, extroverted person, right? You clearly feed off that. But it's interesting how your business has evolved. We talk about personal branding. So for some people listening to this show, them getting onto a board role is a new brand that they will have to build and develop. I know we'll talk about this today, but it's interesting how that's true for you as well.
Exactly. Because, and the bit that's really interesting here is that I remember reading a book sort of probably before people started asking me the question, how do I get onto a board? A book by Malcolm Gladwell called The Tipping Point, which you've read that. It's a fantastic book. And there's a chapter in there, chapter 2, which is called Law of the Few. And in there, he describes these 3 characters or personalities, if you like. So you've got the connector, you've got the maven, which is a Yiddish word I understand for an expert. And I think he calls it the salesperson or the influencer. And he described these people, and I remember reading that going, oh my goodness, it was like this massive light bulb went off. And I thought to myself, I like this connector stuff. What is this? Now, I know I'm a networker. I've been teaching networking, but I'd never heard or seen it described in that way. And do you know what I did? And this is, and I think this is a valuable sort of message for anybody really, is that I didn't know what it meant. And I thought, how do I make that a reality for me in some way or another? So whilst I had the energy and the enthusiasm, as anybody who wants to do board stuff needs to have,
right? But
I thought to myself, I've got this idea, and I put on my, you'll laugh actually, I put on my desk a little notice saying, go on, be the connector you want to be.
I like that. And
the paper, I tell you what, it's been up there for several years. The paper went brown. And I actually still got it because it's a lovely reminder. I've got a different one.
So is this basically like a sticky on your monitor? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, just to remind me. Because you see, it's interesting is that, 1, I wanted to work out how does it work to become a connector. 2, if I'm being honest, how do you commercialize it?
Right.
And 3, what was important was for me to understand the psychology behind it. So what I did was I went and practiced with people where in some ways it didn't matter. And I'd practice making connections. And I know that sounds daft, but I didn't, when you make a connection and some people go, oh, that's fabulous. And other people go, no, I don't want that. Now, in my clumsy early days, I'd be going, no, you seriously need to meet this person.
Well, not everybody's open to it.
No, they're not. It's a thing called timing.
Well, of course, but I'm on the other side. I'm the type that I'm always thinking like you, like I need to connect Bob with Ted, or Jane needs to know about this book. So I'm always sending those out as well. But you're absolutely right. The recipient's an important part of that too.
It is. And that's when I think once I learned more about this connection stuff. So this is a skill that I think I already had, but didn't know it had value, didn't understand can make it work, and where do you go and practice this stuff? And this is no different to sort of like looking at a board, because you're going to lack skills. So where do you go and get the skills before you actually get onto a board? So what I did was, in essence, I used networking as my playground to go and practice stuff in a way that was safe, and that only I knew that I was practicing, no one else had a clue. And then looked at the feedback, whether that was non-verbal or verbal or whatever, to sort of see how do I refine my skills. And this is what makes it interesting, is that around that sort of time, people started saying to me, Heather, you always seem to be, connecting. Talk to me about this non-exec stuff. And it was around about that sort of time these little sort of things started to happen. And I think the key thing here is to pay attention to what's coming to you, and to then question, do I like what's coming to me, or do I need to refine that?
Okay.
So that's how this sort of got started, actually, the Boardroom Ready program.
It's fascinating because, for the longest time in my mind, it's still part of your brand today. You are the networking personal branding expert. That's the way I knew you. That's Heather White. That's the book, as we were joking about, that's still on my bookshelf from 10 years ago that I got from you. That's what that's about. But now I would also add in my head, well, you're a boardroom matchmaker, which just sounds pretty cool. And it's like a dating variation we can all wrap our head around. And that has morphed into another part of your business strategy, which is just a clear evolution the way we talk about it now, but revolutionary at the time from the way you were thinking about it.
Yeah. Once I started to notice people were asking me, how do I get onto a board? So I would then do my research, find some connections, make the connections. And then in there, I was like going, I think there's an opportunity here. I just need to work out what it is. So it's about paying attention. So what I then did was I thought to myself, right, am I interested in the board area? So I did a lot of networking with non-execs and chief execs, chairs, went to these non-exec events and stuff, and I sort of stuck my head in and went, what's this about? Do I like this? Do I resonate with this? What is it that I think I could be useful, could add some value on? So once I did my research, and I'm one of those practical people, I like to go and talk to people rather than read books and sort of stuff. So I got out there and asked lots of questions and listened a lot. And that's when I thought, I don't want to sit on a board, but what I do want to do is I want to make connections. I do love networking. And I wanted to find another way of developing my skill, but from a practical perspective. And that's when eventually, after a few incarnations, I thought, this is what I could do. I could be a boardroom matchmaker. I could go and because I'm good at finding people.
Right.
And this is where LinkedIn is just an absolute gem. So I learned more about how to use LinkedIn. I then started connecting up with people I've never met in my life through LinkedIn, and sort of said, I don't suppose you fancy a cup of coffee? And to my amazement, all these chief execs and chairs were going, yeah, I'd like to do that. And I started telling them about this Boardroom Ready sort of service. And of course, my objective was, first of all, can I find boards who would welcome a senior executive onto their board who hasn't got non-exec experience, bring some sort of value. So I thought to myself, well, can I get those people first? And it took a little while, but eventually, once I got my message right, and I sort of practiced that quite a lot, these chief execs and chairs were really buying into this, going, this is fantastic. And then I went out to the market and said, right, who wants to get some board experience?
Because I imagine it's a bit of a chicken egg thing about which one you're going to have first, the seats or the candidates. And I imagine the seats are the harder ones to get. So that was the first step, right?
Well, funny enough, it was the other way around.
Really?
Because I know this, and this is what makes it interesting, is that, funny enough, I've not had a problem finding boards who are open to this program. And we all thought that would be the sticking point.
Sure.
Now, I've got to clarify this, because the bit that we are going to really look this year to see if we can break through is getting more AIM listed and bigger organizations. If we go too big in terms of a board perspective, it gets way too political and clunky.
Right. So mega corporations, no FTSE 100s.
No.
Yep.
No FTSEs, no, nothing like that at all, simply because their mechanism and the amount of levels you have to go through are just way too complicated and just slows everything down. So that I want to get people on quick and experiencing stuff as fast as we can.
Okay.
And the other part that comes out of this as well, though, is that majority of people will actually end up on an SME or an AIM listed anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Majority of people are not going to sit on a FTSE.
There's just not many seats, right? And they're mostly professional directors.
So what's going to happen is that majority of people, if you're looking at a commercial board, that is that majority of people are going to end up on really an SME or an AIM listed rather than into a FTSE. So you've got to be to get onto a FTSE, you've got to be one of those top names who've left a FTSE to get onto a FTSE. I mean,
plus have already had public board experience.
Yes,
that's not where you start.
Yeah. No, exactly. I say where you start. I mean, you would start on you can go straight into a commercial board. That's not a problem. But you're more than likely going to end up with an AIM or an SME, more than likely an SME before even an AIM. Now, one of the things I always find
just for the audience now. So I like to joke just for a second that I'm bilingual. After living 7 years in the UK, I speak both American and British. But for some of our US audience, just to be clear, we'll think about this like we'll use a European analogy. So the soccer leagues, the footy leagues in the UK, right? There's different levels, and you're moving up through the ranks from the lower tier to the higher tiers, and that's what you're talking about from the different acronyms we're using here.
So certainly in Europe, so you've got the SME market, which is your small to medium-sized enterprises, and then you've got your AIM listed, which is your quoted businesses, and that's where most people are going to end up in that sort of place. But what I'd like to do is actually step back a bit. I'd like to explain why is it so hard to get a paid commercial board experience as a non-exec director. I think it's really important. Now, I'm going to refer to, at this point, the UK market, maybe the European market, rather than the American markets, because they will be different. But the principle holds in general. You're absolutely right there. It does. Absolutely. So at the moment in the UK is that you have got this little mini tsunami going on as to what makes getting a paid job so difficult. Now, bearing in mind that the demand for non-execs and chairs is reasonably stable. I mean,
there's only so many board seats to go around.
There is only so many board seats, and there's not a massive growth of businesses. There's a massive growth of startups, but there's not a massive growth of other businesses. They sort of stay near enough the same. So if you look at who's coming into the market, so you've got the massive, fantastic, very successful push of women on boards. So that has brought in a huge volume of women who are going, I'd like to do that. Okay. And you've got the growth of portfolio workers. Okay. So then those who are able to pick up, say, 2, 3, and I'm not a fan of the 5, 6, and 10s.
It's pretty intense considering it might be about 250 hours you spend a year on a board. That's tough to have that portfolio.
And I don't think, I'm not a fan of the portfolio stuff at all. I mean, 1 or 2, get it. 3, okay. But I think in order to devote yourself to a business that needs your help, then you've got to have the bandwidth in which to do that. So I'm not a fan of those. But anyway, there are those who are out there who can pick up those. Now, there's still a small percentage, but if you've got someone who's picking up, say, 2 or 3 board positions, who's staying on that board for 3 to 6 years, then obviously that's sort of cutting people out as well. But then you've also still got the baby boomers coming in, which we're still hanging in there. I'm one of those. We're still hanging in there, sort of things. So you've still got our generations sort of coming through. But the bit that has massively shifted is that whereas before that you would be 55, 60 plus to start thinking about board stuff.
Right.
Well, I tell you something. We did a placement the other day of a 29-year-old. He's now 30.
That's rare.
A 29-year-old. I know. Sitting on a board. But I tell you what's not rare, though, is the age limit has significantly dropped. So you are talking about 35s, 40-year-olds now looking at non-exec roles.
And that resonates over here in the same way.
Right.
In some ways, it varies by industry, right? We talked about startups before. That's a bit different. It's easier to get an opportunity there. But even like tech industry, for example, younger makes more sense. But you're seeing that same explosion in the U.S. for not only females, but diversity of different ideas, different thoughts, nationalities, backgrounds. And the market is, I'm amazed the quality of the volume of the quality of out there people chasing the board seats.
Totally agree, actually. And to see fresh thinking, diversity in its broadest of senses coming onto these boards is absolutely amazing. And what we're finding is as I talk to boards as well, so when we are doing our campaigning, talking to lots of different chairs, chief execs, what is really interesting is that they are all my boards anyway, they're all up for fresh thinking. They want diversity. In fact, In fact, I've had several of my boards to run sort of say, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, Heather, but can you only send me female applicants? And that, because I think they feel they can get away with it, and it's fine. And by the way, it's fine with me, because they're going, this is one of the ways we can break through our own stereotyping on our boards in a safe way.
Interesting. So it allows them to try before they buy as well.
Exactly.
That's a perspective I hadn't considered from the business, but it is a great way to pitch it, I guess, to a chair. Like, this is a way you can begin to move your board in a different direction. That's fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other part that comes into it as well, because we do insist on this, is that we will only send them people who are from a non-conflicting industry. And so that means that we can hit the mark on fresh thinking and diversity. So that means that let's say they're in manufacturing, we will send them someone from technology as an example, where there's a complete difference in approach. So what we're doing is actually helping to break down those barriers, and the boards absolutely love it.
And so can I just clarify that a little bit? Because when we have talked on previous episodes about this, so Charles King, one of the leading headhunters for board placements, was basically talking about you could go through, maybe you're a finance guy, or maybe you're sort of on the other side, on the other axis, you're change management or project management or social media. So if you're putting them in different industries, are they still taking their specific skill set across, and that's the value that they bring?
You're absolutely right. So what we do is, when I take a brief from my board, is I find out what are the key issues that the board is facing, and also what's missing on their board in terms of skill sets, experience. Once I got that, then I can then go and have a look at those that want board experience and sort of see what skill sets they've got. Now, if I can match up the skill sets and the experience, then normally we get them in. So it's probably worthwhile just sort of stepping back here and sort of explaining exactly what I'm doing. So what I'm doing is I'm putting people onto boards to gain board experience in a non-voting, non-legal, non-directive way. So they can offer an opinion, they can give up their experiences and stuff, but they can't turn around and sort of say, right, okay, I think we should decide on, or we should be, I think you should be doing this. What they can do is sort of say, well, based on my experience and looking at what you want to do, here are some ideas that we could actually play around with. So it's not a decision-making sort of role. So when I'm doing the matching, I still got to look at the fit. So if you come back to your recruiter, your headhunter, even with my role, I've still got to find the right fit for the board in terms of personalities and stuff. Yeah. Really important. But the second thing then is actually bringing in these sort of skill sets, experience. And that's when they're from a different industry, a different sector, that's when the magic really starts to happen, actually, because it breaks down. Because you know what it's like, when you're running a business, you're so into your world, and what you need is someone to go, why do you do it like that? And you suddenly go, that's a good question.
Well, one of the things I learned when I lived in the UK was there's the term naughty, and you get the opportunity to ask the naughty question, which imagine you go to a brand new job, and your first few months, you can ask any question you want. Like, why do we do it like that? That doesn't seem to make sense. You can ask the naughty question. And I think that's the opportunity you're talking about for a new board member to say, I'm not from this industry. Can you guys tell me why we do it like that?
Yeah, exactly. And so what's important here is then to look at, what do people want to gain from all of this? So you've got the board side and you've got the individual side. And one of the things that whenever I'm talking to anyone who wants to gain board experience, my first question is to say, why? Because when you look at becoming a non-exec, all the risk that you carry, responsibilities you have, those days of when you didn't have any of that are long gone. There is a real, there's
legal liability.
Legal liability. And so sometimes, I've had a few people sort of go and join the boards, and when we coach them as well. So what we're doing is we put them onto a board, and we don't just leave them there. I give them a non-exec coach that works with them throughout the 12-month period. I work with them on their network and personal brand, so I want to make sure they do something with the experience. And one of the things that comes out of these conversations is people going, one, it demystifies the board, and two, for some people, they're going, I don't want to go onto a board. They're nuts. They're all insane. Or they realize the responsibility that comes along with it. So they get a lot from the experience. They're able to test their skills to look at how they influence, and they just learn different things, different aspects. Most importantly, they actually start to learn how to take their conversation from operational too strategic or big thinking, if you like. But not everybody then comes off at the end of the 12 months going, oh, yeah, I definitely want to become a non-exec. A few of them are going, fantastic experience, but not something I want to pursue. And that is absolutely right.
Well, I guess that's one of the benefits. But also when I think about it, when you get your first official board role after the, say, intern experience, you've really got to find one you could make a mark. It'll be right cultural fit, it'll add value, because that's where it will snowball. And if you do well there, other ones will come from it. And if you haven't had this sort of interning type experience, and I've never heard about anything like this before, which is why it's so exciting, you will be better situated to go into, it's like finding a new job. Like, how do you want to make sure you're going to be successful in that role? So I think this is wonderful.
Yeah, so, we've had some lovely examples. So, for example, had this lady who actually works for a US business. She's the UK MD, and we put her onto a family business. Nice turnover, 10 million. They're into sandwich making.
Who doesn't like that?
Oh, exactly. And so we've got a really, this particular lady we placed, she's a real strong, passionate, focused person, because that's what she has to do to deal with the business that she runs. And we put her onto this board, which was much more slower, methodical, stable, considered, great sort of stuff. Now, the board turned around and sort of said to us at the end of the 12 months, they said they gained so much, and without her, there's some things they would have never, ever have achieved. However, they also turned around and sort of said, overall, her personality is not one that they could have done more with, as in they didn't offer a non-exec role at the end of it, because they're sort of saying overall, personality wise, it just didn't work.
Interesting.
Fascinating. So now she felt exactly the same. So in actual fact, everyone benefited from that, because what she's now looking at is that when she goes on to her next career, she needs to have the right fit, and she's now much more aware of that. So what you do is you look at what's your default personality wise, and then so you don't just jump at anything, do you? Because this is where a lot of people go wrong. They sort of go, yeah, I finally got a board opportunity. And then the match is wrong.
I would encourage everyone to come with an abundance mentality, in the sense that there will be more opportunities. Don't necessarily take the first. It's like dating, right? You don't just take the first offer you get. You wait for the right offer.
Totally. I remember one of your other interviewees saying exactly that. When she had enough, the right types of ones, she was very generous and sort of said, I don't need to keep taking more. This is enough for me. Somebody else, this is really for somebody else. And I think that's absolutely right. Yeah,
that was Jessie St. Cyr, and she has never chased a board. Boards have chased her, which comes back to your branding and networking, which is incredible. But she also ties in with something you were talking about earlier about the networking, is that she is very clear. If she makes a promise to someone, she's going to network, she's going to help them, she's going to open up the Rolodex. So she's got a certain mentality, and that's not necessarily the same for everybody else. So it's finding that same cultural board set where you can shine and be at your best.
Yeah, because she also said something very interesting as well, really useful. And I think you were talking to her about, at one point, is she going to go for commercial boards?
Right.
And she sort of said, yeah. And then you sort of said, how are you going to do that? And she said, I'm going to go to my networks, I'm going to tell them what I want, I'm going to share with them what I've done. And, I was jumping up and down, going, yes, that's what I love.
It's like she's reading your book.
So now there are cultural differences here as much as there are individual differences as well. So with Jessie, we have a very confident person, someone who believes in her value and can see the difference that she can make. Fantastic. And she's got a very strong message as well, a brand, if you like. I would sort of say there are some cultural differences I would go with, as far as and gender differences, where we've got, and I might get screamed at for this, quite often you can get a lot of women not asking for what they want. Okay. And you can get a lot of men asking for what they want. That's not to say everybody does that.
That's very true. The company that we met the first time, the consulting model, where that company, PA Consulting Group, we learned very clearly when we looked at promotions, the men historically would come about a year before the management thought they're ready and say, I'm ready, promote me. And the management team would say, not yet. The women would come about a year after they got promoted and said, I knew I was ready now. I didn't know I was ready then. And the management team was like, yes, we knew you were ready. That's why we promoted you. It's just a little historical norm there.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we're really clear on is helping our people to sort of say, right, go and ask for what you want. So it's interesting. I've got a fantastic lady on another board at the moment, and she's done her 12 months, but the board was only meeting 4 times a year. So it went really quick. So I sort of said to her, right, I said, so do you want to stay? And she's going, yeah. She said, so much more I want to learn. I said, right, okay, now I can negotiate this for you. I said, or you can go and ask for it. Now, these are senior people. These aren't shy, retiring sort of people. These are senior people. But it's interesting where with a lot of the females that we're working with, getting them to ask and to see the value that they bring. So she's now been tasked with, right, you now go back and you go and ask for it. I could do it, but I think this is now where you need to. But she was saying that what she has done is she's brought what she's been learning from the board back into her workplace, which is the key objective for us.
Sure.
And then, so she's sort of saying, one, she's no longer worried about rejection as much as she used to. You know, if people don't accept what she sort of says, she no longer sits there and finds that, you know, really difficult. She is asking a lot more for what she wants. And we were looking at sort of things like, you probably would have heard of Amy Cuddy, who does the power moves and
she's
stuff.
Great.
So,
Love her.
fantastic lady. And I think if you're more introspective, maybe towards the shy side, those are superb. I mean, I'd say to everybody, go and look up on the internet, YouTube, and watch what she does.
I'll put it in the show notes. It's been disproved since, but I'll say I still do the power poses. It works for me. I don't know if it's a placebo effect.
Wow. Okay. Well, if it still works, it
exactly.
Still works.
I love it.
I can't believe that's been disproved. I mean, blimey, I do it all the time. You know, sort of things like, and these are sort of silly things, but they are so important. And it's sort of things I learned from Amy Cuddy as well, is that, you know, when someone walks into a room, and, you know, a lot of people do this instinctively, but some people need to know to be seen to sort of show this. You know, you get up, you walk over and shake their hands. And it's almost like, it's not I'm not going to call it a power, a controlling thing, but it shows enthusiasm, it shows energy, it shows confidence,
respectability. Yeah,
exactly. So it's sort of things like that. When and this particular lady is on a very strong, small board, all blokes, very comfortable in their skill sets, and you've got someone like her, which is a successful lady, but in her own environment. So that's what I mean by changing your habits in which to sort of succeed at something else.
And Heather, this has been wildly successful thus far. So you've had, I believe it's at least 8 people through it successfully, right? In only a year.
Yeah. So we started in earnest, I suppose you could say. It took a little while to work out the process and so you've got the mechanisms, which is how do you find boards, how do you find individuals? And then you've got what's the message, what do people need to hear, what language do you need to use? I mean, even coming up with something like Boardroom Matchmaker took a little while to do that. And the reason we call it a Boardroom Ready program is because that's the language that people use, but it took a little while to even hear that. So then learning how to become the connector, when do you move, when don't you move on sort of people. So that all took a lot of time. But yet, since October 17, we've now done 8 placements. I've got another 4 or 5 that are going through at the moment. So we should be in the next. And this year, I'm sort of reckon on we'll get 20 through the program.
Wow. Well, that is amazing growth and development. I'm glad that we could be almost in the foundational stages of you hearing about it. And I'm hoping it will be driving more people to you after this, both from the companies and the individuals. and to that, we will clearly put it in the show notes. But how would you like people to follow up and learn more about the great work that you guys are doing with your boardroom matchmaking?
So best thing to do is either connect with me on LinkedIn or drop into my website, which is all the W's, boardroomready.co. Find me there, but LinkedIn is just probably the easiest place, to be honest, because if you just type in Heather White, I just pop up.
And you'll see an example of a great profile and how it's built out with the right messaging and the personal acknowledgments and all that sort of stuff. So I think it sells itself really well there.
Thank you. Yeah, it's and that itself is learning also how to express yourself through something like LinkedIn. I tell you that, and just a very quick sort of thing for anybody out there is what we learned when we were doing our campaigning is that majority of people accept LinkedIn invites through their mobiles. And so we accidentally discovered that the best way of setting up your profile was to have your best words, your key words in your job title, not your job title unless that's the bit that is the trigger for somebody, but something that is expertise based, so that when people are going through their mobiles, they're going these, because they only see 4 or 5 words anyway. So you want to make them the best words for people to see, and that's when people go, yes, I accept, yes, I accept, yes, I accept.
So you're talking about the headline at the very top of the page?
That's at the headline top, yeah. So you'll see on mine, it says Boardroom Matchmaker. And in my case, is ego-based, because that's why a lot of people...
Well, it's a key word, another boardroom, right? It really pops out there.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you got, if you think it through and get those words right, it actually makes a significant difference to how people will receive you and see you.
And the phrase resonated with me right away. So it just sticks in your mind. It's very clear, and it evokes the image of what you'd exactly want it to do. So kudos to you to see that growth and development. And I think it's fantastic to see this is just another part of your business. It's a natural fit. It's easy for me to picture it. It's the sort of situation where someone would say, I know Heather, I could see how this works. I should send people to her. So I would love to have you back on the show in a future episode to hear how it's going and developing. And because clearly you're learning as part of this as well, both to facilitate that for others from boards and for individuals. And I think that was one of the key takeaways about how does this help the board? It's not just to help the individual. It's sort of like a job hiring situation. I have to tell students and alumni from the university all the time, it's not about you. It's about the hiring manager inside the table. And so it's the same way for someone going on to board. Don't worry about yourself. Worry about the board. Are you the right fit? Are you going to make their skill sets work in a different way? Do you think that's fair?
I think that's totally fair, actually. And when I'm connecting up with my boards, everything has to be focused in on what do they need. And the bit that's really interesting is how quickly can you build trust with someone you've never met before? Because a lot of the chief execs and the chairs will talk to me initially on the phone. So we've had a couple of LinkedIn email exchanges, and then we go on the phone. And what they do, and this is a bit that took me a while to get used to, is they're basically saying, what do you want?
Right. I'm busy. What do you need? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got, if I'm lucky, 5 minutes. And if I'm doing a really good job, I get into 10. And that's when, if I've done a really good job, that's when they were sort of saying, okay, let's book in a half an hour session, or let's meet up and do coffee, whichever. And I've had to really hone my skills down to get to the point and to be really, I'm going to use the word brave, because this is not my natural place. It is now, but in the early days, I was, I remember, I do remember very quickly, I remember talking to this one chief exec, and even on the phone, I have to say my knees were trembling. His LinkedIn profile was pretty impressive. He worked for a big organization, and he just came on, he went, he just sort of said, I don't know, sort of something along the lines of, really good to sort of talk to you, what do you want?
Yeah. How can I help you? What do you need?
I was like, And that's when I thought, these are busy people. They're not being rude by being direct like this. They're just going, you've got my attention, go for it.
Yeah.
So I thought, so I've learned to go for it.
And I think that's fair for all of us. I mean, another quick story on my part. I remember when I was leaving business school and I was trying to find the right opportunity, and JP Morgan was a top firm I wanted to go to. I knew one of the senior managing directors. He was an alumni from my alma mater as well. It took me months to get the meeting with him because he's so senior. We sat down, we had a 5-minute chat about our mutual alma mater. Then he goes, what do you want today? What do you need from me? How can I help you? And then I was able to give him the exact 2 things I wanted from him. And he said, great, I'll make these calls. Have a good day. That was it, right? Busy people who want to be helpful, help them help you. And that works for all of the networking and the branding and all the great stuff you do. So Heather, I'm just thrilled to see your program doing so well. And I feel like you've given not only a great sense today about how a program could be fit for people, but so much knowledge that we can all take and apply to our role. And I would just like to thank you for sharing your insights and inspiring and helping all of us today to be more boardroom bound.
Thank you. My pleasure. And good luck with it. This is brilliant. I love what you're doing.
That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I really enjoyed chatting with my friend Heather White. I've known her for a decade, and I'm so excited about her new Boardroom Ready program and how she's brokering personal development opportunities for senior executives to join boards. So they're an observer for 12 months and they gain real commercial boardroom experience, and often leads, if not with that same board, which can be the case, or to other boards. I think this is a great program that a lot of our people would be very interested in, or at least the foundational principles we talked about today. Now remember to head over to podcast.gordon.edu where you can get links to all of the resources we discussed today. And if you enjoyed this episode, please take 30 seconds to leave a review on iTunes. Reviews on iTunes are one of the best ways to get word out about the podcast. So thanks for joining me on this episode of the show. I can't wait to share more stories and strategies from brilliant business minds with you again next week. And remember to keep tuning in to be boardroom bound.